But my number one priority as Secretary of State is going to be to restore the public's role in the process.
State 48 News can exclusively announce Representative Alex Kolodin has officially entered the race for Secretary of State.
That's why we have a legislative process for the criminal laws that we make. And by the way, we're not perfect either, but at least we have a robust process where issues can be aired and discussed.
All eyes on Arizona. In our one-on-one interview, we asked the big questions with today's conservative newsmaker.
So Fontes has been a little bit all over the map, even in the last week of he was going to run for this position, that position, whatever it might be. Are you feeling pretty confident that he will be your challenger?
Hello.
How are you?
Doing great. How are you doing?
Good. I guess congratulations are in order.
I don't know about that, but I'll accept it in the spirit in which it's intended.
Okay. Are you excited? How are you feeling?
Excited, nervous, all the things.
So let's talk a little bit about this process and how it got to this point. Can you tell me a little bit about when you found out and how this all started?
I honestly just view it as an extension of what I've been doing in elections for quite a while. Practiced election law for over a decade. And I've had to whoop Adrian Fontes' butt a couple of times in that decade, and right before the 2020 general election, I brought him up to the Arizona Supreme Court, and they said that he was committing criminal violations of Arizona election law. So obviously it was a civil case, not a criminal one, but they indicated that. And then he put out his unlawful EPM, which for those who don't know, that's the Arizona Elections Procedures Manual. It's a source of Arizona elections law. He put one out before this most recent election where he was essentially trying to criminalize speech that he didn't like, even outside of the polling place. And he was trying to do a bunch of illegal other things as well. And with our general counsel in the House, her and I got together and developed a strategy, a litigation strategy to take him on. Some of that litigation the House did. Some was done by my colleagues in private practice. And we beat him no fewer than 3 times over that. So this is a guy who really pushes the boundary of violating our election laws. And that really jeopardizes public trust and confidence in the election. When you're sneaking around, trying to slip things in an elections procedures manual to deprive voters of their voice, that's a problem. I've always thought that was a problem. My career demonstrates I think that's a problem. And at some point, somebody has to give voters their power back, restore transparency to the system, restore trust and confidence. And I'm ready to do that.
So tell me, I understand that you have a law practice. Will you be able to do these 2 things both at the same time? Are you trying to think about professionally, what you'll be doing on the side or full time?
That's a great question. It's the same job I've been doing for a while. But I imagine with the Secretary of State's role, that's going to be more of a full-time position. Maybe I'll pick up some work on the side or whatever. But I think that's going to require full-time and attention to do that job properly, certainly in election years. And part of that's also going to be getting together the right staff, competent people who can help me run that office well, and make sure that things run seamlessly for the voters of the state. And there's going to be a lot of demands on the staff as well. I mean, in terms of restoring the transparency that we want to restore, keeping the public engaged with the process, doing notice and comment rulemaking, which is another thing that Fontes unlawfully omitted when he developed his elections procedures manual, right? That's going to be some very time-intensive stuff. So I'm a very efficient person, but even for me, I think that's going to be more or less a full-time gig.
So Fontes has been a little bit all over the map, even in the last week of he was going to run for this position, that position, whatever it might be. Are you feeling pretty confident that he will be your challenger?
Nobody knows with this guy because he's, um, obviously his internals were bad. In congressional race he was looking at, and he's certainly been making noises about going up against Katie Hobbs. I think that he's worried about the Secretary of State's race because he knows that voters of Arizona don't like the way that he's managed the office. I mean, the fact that there were over 200,000 voters revealed not to have appropriate documented proof of citizenship on the rolls right before the 2024 general election, when it's the Secretary of State's job to help county recorders maintain accurate voter rolls under federal law. That's his job. And he didn't do it. And then even after that, he didn't do it, right? Maricopa County Recorder Justin Heap just had to remove another 100,000 voters from Maricopa County rolls that shouldn't have been registered on our rolls because Adrian Fontes isn't doing his job. And I had to actually sue him right before the election just to get him to produce records of that. The court said, yeah, you got to produce the records. And it turns out he doesn't have any records to produce because he hasn't been doing his job. I will do it. I will do the job properly, and I will make sure that it gets done for the voters of the state.
I think you have a really big job ahead of you. Arizona, I would say, has a bit of a black eye right now with elections and our reputation here in Arizona. You are a very strong conservative. What will be your number one priority if you get into this office?
My number one priority if I get back into this office, or I should say when I get to this office, because I'm fairly confident about my ability to beat Adrian Fontes, given how many times I've beat him in the past. But my number one priority as Secretary of State is going to be to restore the public's role in the process, to restore transparency so the public doesn't have to trust me. The public can see for themselves whether or not our elections are being properly administered. And that, I believe, will complete or at least significantly advance my work of restoring public confidence in elections. Because public confidence in elections doesn't come from, elected officials telling the public, oh, your concerns are silly, there's nothing to worry about. That's not how it works. Public confidence in elections comes from having an election system that you can see, touch, and feel, that you can look for yourself as deep as you want in real time and see for yourself whether the elections are being properly run.
The military should have absolutely no authority over our elections, no authority over the cybersecurity of our elections, no authority over the running and operations of the civilian government, period.
Representative Kolodin is a champion of legislation requiring an elections procedure manual to be approved by the governor and the chairpersons of the House of Representatives and Senate committees, rather than just the governor and attorney general.
The separation of powers exists for a good reason, right? And that reason is that the branches typically have different interests, right? And see things that other branch misses because of those different interests. And so a way to do that while preserving the sort of expedited nature of the authorship and revision of the Elections Procedures Manual is to take it from 3 members of the executive branch to the way that we do everything else and say, hey, we're going to have the chairs of the House and Senate committees with jurisdiction over elections and the governor do the approval process. And I think that way we're going to get much better, much more well thought out results at the terms of this manual, and it will be much more useful to our elections officials. And so for those reasons, I urge an aye vote on this bill.
And the truth of the matter is, if the public knows that at any time they could see for themselves the internal workings of our elections, a lot of them aren't even going to bother. Just knowing that they can do it is going to be enough to make them feel better about participating in our democracy. And I think that is so, so critical.
Do you believe in one day, one vote? Do you believe in early ballots? What are some of the conditions around those? What's your philosophy?
One of the reasons that I'm running for Secretary of State is because I don't think the Secretary of State ought to have a philosophy. Okay. The Secretary of State does not make the law. The legislature makes the law. And when Adrian Fontes has tried to moonlight making the law, like when he tried to abolish the First Amendment in his elections procedures manual, it has ended in disaster. The Secretary of State's role is to follow the law, is to implement the choices of the people's elected representatives in the legislature and the governor, and make sure that system operates transparently and flawlessly and efficiently and quickly. That's the Secretary of State's job.
Well, Fontes has given some pushback against Trump on some of his policies, and definitely some pushback with Doge. Do you have any response to that?
Yeah. He doesn't like transparency very much. We're seeing a theme reoccur. You know, if Doge wanted to come in and look at the job I was doing as Secretary of State, I would love that. Can you imagine that they have the best and brightest minds and they're going to help me improve my systems? Like, that's the greatest thing ever. Like, and it's for free, or at least no expense to the state of Arizona. Why would you reject that? And all it does is breed this thought in the public's mind that he's got to be doing something wrong. And indeed he is, right? Because he's not following the law with respect to voter roll maintenance. We learned that in our election. We've beaten him on court over that point. And now he's worried about Doge coming in and taking a look under the hood and finding out more ways that he's failed to do his job. You know, you had asked me about doing the job full time. I don't think he's been doing the job part time. He's been doing nothing. He's been sitting there trying to take away voters' rights and not actually focusing on the meat and potatoes of the job, which is to help the county recorders maintain accurate voter rolls, write a lawful EPM, and just generally make sure that voters don't have to think about the Secretary of State's position. Our elections should just work. They should just work. There shouldn't be this sort of grandstanding and, about national politics or whatever. You should just focus on making the system function efficiently and transparency for voters.
Is your family excited for you?
They feel like I feel. They feel like I feel. Nervous and excited at the same time.
I bet. What are your final thoughts for the person who is maybe just meeting you for the first time through this interview and hearing from you? What would be your final thoughts?
My final thoughts are, you need somebody who has the courage to listen to you. I think too often we get people in these positions, Democrat, Republican, but when they get there, they become contemptuous because they feel like they have more knowledge than the public. And frankly, I got more knowledge than any Stephen Rich or Adrian Fontes of the world about elections. I've been doing election law for 10 years. But when you really know elections, when you really understand elections, you understand that when the public is telling you there's a problem, there's always a problem. Because either the public's seeing something that you didn't, in which case you better fix it, or the public is losing confidence in the elections because of a problem that doesn't exist. And then you have to not just tell the public that problem doesn't exist, you have to show them, here's the system, here's why that problem doesn't exist. You have to satisfy them. And for too long, instead of just listening to the public and taking them seriously when they have concerns about the state of their democracy, our elections officials have mocked people. They've belittled people, called them rubes. It's just beneath the dignity of the office. And I don't want to do that. I want people to know that if you come to me, you're in the grassroots, you come to me, and you have a concern. I don't care if legitimate, illegitimate. It's not for me to decide. You're a voter, you're concerned. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to hear what you have to say. And if appropriate, I'm going to look into it because I work for the voters. And the job of the Secretary of State is to make sure that Arizona voters are happy and confident and can feel good about the results of an election, regardless of what they are.
Have fun tomorrow. Enjoy the day. Take it all in.
I will. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye-bye.